makes this all happen for us, our liaison to the outside watercolor world, Mike Killalay, and he will be introducing our demonstrator for the evening. Mike, it's all yours.
Hey, thank you very much. I will try not to overstate Michael Broshar or his work, but that's pretty difficult. I look on the internet a lot and I see a lot of artists and I've collected a lot of names, but I sometimes think that there are people in New York State, downstate anyway, who don't know the difference between Iowa and Buffalo, but I do. And you will too once you see Michael's work. He paints in a style that I really admire very much. I guess that's because I paint in a similar way. I like to take my paints with me when I travel. And I like to, just a very curious guy, and I like to see things every place. So I just keep going at it, and Michael seems to do the same thing. He has a background as an architect, which may account for some of his buildings. He likes to do buildings, but he finds the charm and the beauty in out of the way places. And I just admire that so much. So I think we're very fortunate tonight to have Mike with us. Mike, I'll turn this over to you.
Can you unmute yourself, Mike? Still can't hear you.
No.
How about now?
No, you have to turn off the audio on the other one, though. Just have it on in one place.
Okay.
Nope. You still have audio on in two places.
Okay.
Actually, not just mute, but turn the whole audio off.
Is it okay now?
No. Nope, still bad. You have to turn the whole audio off. Go down to the icon for mute.
Yeah, I did that.
And it gives you a bunch of stuff to fool with when you click on the thing. It says leave computer audio. Do it on one or the other.
How about now?
It's wonderful.
Great. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Well, hi everybody. I'm relatively new to watercolor. I have always been really quite interested in art and considered a career in art, but opted for architecture when I was in college. And so I've done some oil painting and acrylic painting, and then was doing a lot of digital artwork, primarily on an iPad, leading up to about 2012. We went on a trip to Colorado, and I happened to step into a gallery, and there was a watercolor artist whose work was featured at the time, and I was very impressed. I'd always liked watercolor, but and decided I had some time, so I was going to try and see what I could do with it. It was terrible. I mean, I picked up some cheap watercolors and tried it, and just had a terrible time with it. So I found a book by John Lovett, who's an Australian painter, and went through the book, and I think I learned a bit from that. And then I was looking at his website and found that he was going to be doing a workshop the next year in northern Wisconsin. And so I signed up for a week-long workshop with him, and I have not stopped painting since. I still continue to explore other media. I've been doing some work with water mixable oils and some with acrylics, but I love watercolor, and I'd say it's my primary painting medium.
Michael, could you say something about how you find the subjects? What makes you choose a particular subject?
Sure. We live in Northeast Iowa, which is tends to be gently rolling hills, a lot of farm structures, a lot of farms. And the town that I live about 15 miles south of Waterloo, which is an industrial community. It's where they make John Deere tractors. Oh. And it was also the home of Rath Packing Company. So it had a very industrial beginning, but sort of fell on hard times during the 1980s. We also, we spend a lot of time on the Mississippi River, and the river valley all along the Mississippi is absolutely beautiful. Very steep hills, bluffs, and some wonderful old river towns. And so we drive around quite a bit. I drive around just looking for things that spark my interest. And whether it's farm buildings or small towns, there's an historic town in far northwest Illinois called Galena, which in the 1850s was actually the largest city in Illinois. It was a lead mining town, and it is also the home of General Ulysses Grant. And it has some remarkable architecture, because really nothing was going on there in the 50s and 60s, when a lot of communities across the US were tearing down their historic downtowns. And so it has just a wonderful flavor. But there are also a number of river towns or towns that are close to the river that have just a really, really a cool terrain, lots of rolling hills, long vistas, and these little towns that had a strong main street with historic fabric. And in fact, what I'm going to paint tonight is a little town about 15 miles from Galena that is called Elizabeth, Illinois. And US Highway 20 goes through Elizabeth. It makes a hard turn into the downtown, and the downtown's not very large, but it has some really neat structures with turrets, and so late 1800s masonry structures with some really kind of neat turrets. So yeah, I keep my my iPhone with me all the time. I used to keep a digital camera with me, but I'm snapping pictures all the time, and some of the pictures are not great, but they provide enough of a basis that I can develop a painting from the images that I have. I also take photographs of skies, trees that I find interesting that I'll never turn into a painting, but they can inform some of my paintings. So I have, let's see, there is a, let's see. Well, that didn't work. I was hoping to Carol, is there a way that you can take that other image and make that the primary image? Great. Thank you. So I have, this is a 11 by 15 it's a Baohong, not sure how it's pronounced, paper that I just tried out recently, and really it's rough texture. I really like it quite a bit. And funny story, I ordered 10 sheets from Jerry's Artorama, and when it arrived, they sent me 10 packages of 10 sheets, but only billed me for one. So I did call them and say, I don't think you really meant to do this. I use a sketchbook. I've filled up a number of sketchbooks, and a number of the paintings that I do, I'll do some very small sketches before I turn around and do a completed painting. So I do keep my sketchbook with me all the time, and I use it. I like sketching when I'm traveling, and I can afford the time now that I'm retired from architecture to actually do more sketching. So anyway, this is a photograph of Elizabeth, Illinois. The highway runs through it and makes a hard left turn towards Galena at the end of the road where there's a car dealership. And it has these old red brick structures, and there are a number of these turrets on the corner of these buildings. And it looks like it was almost sort of a competition when they were building the town to see who could have the nicest turret. What I really like about this is that there's a great quality of light. The light is coming from left to right. The sky is pretty soft, but a little bit dramatic with the cloud pattern. But the contrast between the red brick and the white turrets really attracted me to painting this picture. I can talk a little bit about, I use a fairly limited palette. I've got, this is a palette that John Hurtley in England made. I have two palettes of his. One is a travel, and this is my studio palette. And then I use, I do use most of these colors in a painting. I use indigo blue, quinacridone gold, and then Venetian red I use for skin tones, and then the earth tones through the yellows, and then I've got my blues and greens and reds, imperial purple, alizarin crimson, carmine, and then lunar violet, which I use as a black, which is similar to neutral tint, but it has a little bit of a hint of purple to it. And then permanent orange and lavender. And I think all of these colors are either Daniel Smith or Core, with the exception of the lavender, which is a Holbein color. And then I keep a number of tubes handy when I'm painting Pyrrole red, Pyrrole orange, white, lavender, and Jaune Brilliant. So a couple of those are Daniel Smith, the others are Holbein, and they're more opaque, and I use them generally later in the painting when I'm trying to get in a little detail and maybe recover some lights that I may have painted over. I tend to paint with complementary colors. So I will use blue. If I use a cobalt blue, I will use permanent orange with it. And I use a lot of the combination of either ultramarine blue or cobalt blue with burnt sienna to make darks. But then I also use indigo with burnt umber and ultramarine blue to make some very dark darks. So I think I'll get started on the painting, or want to see if I can't get this done in about an hour and a half. I use a number of, well, brushes. I use a lot of mop brushes. And then I use, these are some synthetic pointed rounds from rosemary brushes. They're very similar to Escoda Perla, but a little bit more of an extended point. And then I've actually been playing around with, I watched a demo that Richard Sneary did, and he was using these Asian brushes, and I bought a bunch of those and have been playing around with them, and have found that I can get some pretty nice results with those as well. So I'll start by, I think for this sky, I'm probably going to wet the paper. And in my painting, I try and think about aerial perspective quite a bit in terms of the things that I'm painting that are farther back in the background will be paler colors, and then more powerful colors as I get more to the foreground. Okay, that's all wet, and I've got some cobalt blue mixed up, and I'll just start dropping that in. I tend, you know, as in most watercolor, generally paint from light to dark. And just letting that run. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, good.
Okay, great. Leave some clouds in there. I have watched a number of videos that Joseph Zbukvich has done, and one of the things I do teach a course at the Center for the Arts in Waterloo, and one of the things that Joseph talks about is not dabbing at paint. And so I try not to do that. I try and paint things relatively quickly.
Did you hear about that palette that you have from somebody like Thomas Schaller or Ian or?
Actually, Ian has, I think it's a Craig Young palette that is what I was actually interested in as my travel palette originally. That's interesting. I was not supposed to do that. That's supposed to be a roof, so it's supposed to be light. So we'll see what we can do about that. So I just went and did a search for that Craig Young palette and found this palette by it's by the Little Brass Box Company. The guy's name is John Hurtley, and he's quite a craftsman. And there's, just like with Craig Young, there's a long waiting list to get the palette. I waited each time I've done this. I think I've waited a year to get the palette.
Yeah, I looked it up too and decided that that was something that I'd have to have in another life. They look wonderful.
Okay. So that's probably gonna do it for that big mop. And one of the things that I've learned more as of late is the need to allow the paint time to move. Because I tended to be a little too impatient with that. Okay. And I will start right in on this. I'm just using a burnt sienna and cobalt blue here. And I tend to, as I start to move down the page, I tend to start introducing a complementary color. So I've started with mostly burnt sienna, and now I've added some cobalt blue. Just really concentrating on keeping the preserving the whites. Oh, that's very strong. That's okay, because it's going to get covered up by the shadow. And I tend to use the paint all of the detail and then come in after the fact and use shadows to differentiate some of the details. So now I'll start adding some blue into that. Here I'm gonna retain some of those. Okay. So the light is coming from right to left, or left to right rather, sorry, on this. And so most of these buildings on this left side are going to be in shadow.
You said that John Lovett was the first guy that you studied with?
Yes, yeah.
But he's must have come over here for a special trip from Australia.
There is a place in Lac du Flambeau, Wisconsin. And they host artist workshops. It's a place on a lake, and most of the time it's a resort, but in the fall and the spring they host workshops. The proprietor is a guy that is quite interested in art. He was trained as a landscape architect. Okay.
His work is, I've never heard of him. His work is really great. I was looking at it.
Yeah, it is. It's there's almost a sort of a pop art quality to some of it sometimes, but I really like it. I think he's just a great. So, Carol, you'll know this, that I was trained as an architect, which generally means that I want to control everything. And what I found is that my watercolor work has gotten better when I've given up more control.
You use enough water so that you have the, what do you call it when the paint settles into the bottom part of what you
have a bead.
A bead, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it should be hard to learn how to do, but man.
To learn what?
To learn how to do that. It just seems like I don't know.
No, but actually when I teach, the biggest issue that I have is getting students to use enough moisture.
Yep.
And to give up some of that control.
And the watercolor left on its own gives you wonderful effects.
Yes.
Michael, how much of this is done in plein air?
Well, last week I went to downtown Cedar Falls, which is Waterloo and Cedar Falls are joined at the hip, and just sat up and did that work plein air. I really, when we travel, I always try and get out and do at least one plein air painting that's more of a finished painting.
I was thinking about how a bright sun would make things dry faster.
Yes, I participated in a plein air event in Red Wing, Minnesota, which is a little city on the Mississippi, south of Minneapolis and St. Paul this summer. And it was on one of the days that I painted, it was 97 degrees when I finished the painting. And yeah, it was a challenge. I couldn't get the paint would dry before I could
yes,
get back to it from. All right. Just paint through these cars, and need a bigger brush. I'm going to use this. I tend to try and use, cooler colors in the background. And have them get warmer as they come forward.
Uh-huh.
Michael, that looks like a pretty steep angle that you're working at.
It is. It's about probably 30 degrees. But that really actually helps get the bead to move down the page.
So use lots of water, I guess, is what I'm hearing.
Yes. Yeah.
Seems so obvious.
Yeah.
Well, it is, except the first time that the drip runs down the sheet, everybody runs for cover. It's like, oh, I can't do that. All right. So I need to get some of these.
Who else did you study with besides John Lovett?
Ian Stewart. And that was how I got involved with the Iowa Watercolor Society. I didn't know that it actually existed. And I was looking at Ian's website and came upon that he was going to be at the Iowa Watercolor Society. So I signed up. But Ian is, his father is a very good watercolor painter. Ian's quite good. And
he was here doing a workshop 2 years ago.
Okay. Okay, I think I have all of my lightest colors in, and gonna get a little bit more detailed. I'm going to mix up some ultramarine with burnt sienna, which tends to be a rather red color. So you get a little bit of a purple tone to it. And that's what I generally like to do my windows. Depending on if they're dark, I tend to like them using that purplish color. But some of these I want to be relatively light as well, so I'm gonna just lay them in with. And I tend to use, I like these pointed round brushes. I used to use some flats, and John Lovett uses a lot of flat brushes, but once I started using these pointed rounds, I kind of left off using some of those. I use some flats, but not very many.
Are those the rosemary brushes, the pointed rounds?
They are, yeah. These are, she makes these specifically for Vladislav Yellowslav. But her snowdrop brushes are really, really wonderful brushes. And I try not to get too careful when I'm painting the windows. I try and keep them fairly loose. Now I'm gonna start to get some of these darks in back here.
Must be relatively dry in your studio, because it seems like you should be running out into the paint around it when you're putting the darks in, but it's not.
I'm getting a little bit of that, but I'm generally okay with that. Adding windshields. That one's running a little bit. Okay. Shut some of these windows are pretty light, and so they've got curtains behind them, which is great because that means that I can get some shadows in those. There will be some trees here on the left, but I'm generally going to do those after the fact. Some signs here. Really just still kind of working in the midtones. Just putting some water on this that I can then come down this side and create that illusion of roundness. We've been traveling Route 66 over the last number of years as well. That has, there's some great, well, there's some really weird stuff along Route 66, but there's also some yes, great architecture that I've done a number of paintings, but they tend to be ruins. Are the more interesting things to me.
Michael, you said this is Route 20?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, actually, Route 20 is about 4 miles from my house here in Western New York.
Yes. Yeah.
Goes across the country.
I knew that it ran up that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Just take a look at this for a minute and see what need to start adding some start. I start with just general the general shapes of the buildings, and then as that dries, then I start to come in and add some of the architectural detail through the shadows. And I'm typically working a little bit left to right or right to left because I'm left-handed. Other workshops that I took after Ian, and this is what really got me started with plein air. My wife, for a gift one year, gave me a workshop with Alvaro Castanet. And it was in San Francisco. And we essentially met in a hotel lobby. We didn't have a classroom. We met in a hotel lobby every morning, and then went out and painted on the sidewalks of San Francisco. So a little bit of nervousness and pressure. Starting that, having never painted plein air before I did that.
Wow, that's the way to start.
Yeah, well, the first day, Alvaro would paint, and then we would follow and essentially paint what he was painting. Somebody came up to me and said, "Gee, that's really nice. Do you sell your work?" And I said, I was so, sort of worked up about the whole thing. I just said, no. And, but by the third day, it became a case where it's like, I think I got this. And people were coming up and would talk. And so it turned out to be a lot of fun. Now trying to get some of the little bit darker tones in here to suggest the storefronts. And I'm going to just need to start to think about extending these shadows now. Okay. Gonna need to start getting foliage into this pretty soon.
Well, that brush holds a lot of water.
It does, yeah. You can kind of just start going on it and not give up.
What kind of brush is that?
Well, it's by Rosemary. It's a British company, and they sell just direct sale. They don't sell in stores. But she has a very loyal following, and has had some very good, a lot of really good oil painters use her brushes. Richard Schmid used her brushes.
Mm-hmm.
They come fairly quickly too. I was amazed at how fast.
Yeah, they do. Okay.
Very few places that people, watercolor painters from Buffalo, haven't. They purchase things from almost everywhere.
Yeah.
We are buyers.
Okay. One of the things that I thought was interesting when I took the course from Ian Stewart was that he talked about every painting goes through an ugly phase. And
you can just get yourself through it.
Right. Yep. And the other thing that I find interesting about watercolor is that it isn't until you put in sort of the last details that the painting really starts to pop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's tighten up a couple of places here.
One thing you have in Iowa that we don't have in Buffalo so much is a lot of bright sun.
I'm sorry, say that again.
We don't have as much bright sunny days here as you do in Iowa. It's more like, it's not as bad as England, but
yeah,
often I'm envious of the light that comes out of some people's paintings. It's obvious they don't live in Western New York.
Okay, one thing that I intended to do and didn't, which is always points out the importance of planning your painting, is that I intended to get that foliage behind this building. Oops, when the sky was still wet, to let it bleed in, but I think I didn't, so I'm gonna go ahead and add it now. Just really needs to just be a suggestion anyway, so.
Is this sort of a hill behind there?
No, it's, well, yes, there actually is. And there's a big church up on top of the hill, but this is really just the trees behind that building.
Mm-hmm.
To get to, I want to keep that fairly light, just to suggest it back there, but get darker as it comes down. Okay, I think I'm ready to do foliage, people, and a few light poles, and we'll be wrapped up. So when I do the trees, I'm gonna, there's a pretty good, I'm gonna use a pretty thick mix and get that tree in. And there's this tree that, and I find that when I do trees, I tend to want to hold the brush back farther away from the point. And these look absolutely terrible when you first start doing them. Okay, and now I'm gonna mix up. Somebody was talking about undersea green before the meeting started. And undersea green, I just found out this weekend from Michael Holter, is ultramarine blue and quinacridone gold. So just if you're a control freak, this is the stuff that just drives you nuts. Now that spatter is on there, I'm going to take this brush and just use the side of it. And that just dissolves some of the ugly, dumb trunks. And then you can keep coming back and add, you can add different colors to it. So I'm adding some orange. Need to get this little tree down here established. And if you get too many that go where you don't want them in the sky, then turn them into birds.
Would they be happy little birds?
Oh, very happy, yes.
This is in Iowa.
So you leave some of the and then you can also come back in and add a little bit of detail to these.
Boy, this is worth the price of admission.
The trees?
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to paint them.
Yeah.
All right. Now, and then there's an evergreen tree over here that I need to get in. I tend to treat evergreen trees as just pretty dumb.
Did you say pretty dumb?
Pretty dumb. Yeah, they're just try and be random. They tend to be very full. And all I want is something to balance the darks on the left with the darks on the right. One of the things I like to do too is get rid of the shape of the point. You can use, I have some old brushes that I just beat up as, you know, try and ruin them. And they make great tree brushes because you can get the, you know, you get the point to go away, and they're rather random. One of the things that I really, John Lovett, when I took that workshop, gave us all little basically chip brushes that you get at a hardware store. And it's amazing what you can do with those. We did a lot of painting with those. Okay, and then I like to add a little bit in the tree. I like to add a little bit of detail using a rigger brush just to pick up some of the, just to suggest some of the branches coming through. Okay, Let's see. Gotta wrap this up pretty quickly. Not be that bright. Okay. For people, I use Venetian red, which is sort of a, it's like burnt sienna, but it's more transparent. I tend to make my figures pretty simple and pretty quick. It's still wet, so. And a park bench here. So I'm going to need to riggers are good for park benches. And then we need some the way that tree is. Just let that float off the bottom. Okay, and I'm going to go to a small mop and add some, first of all, Okay, I'm getting going to add a little bit of detail in terms of the power poles, and I get my brush pretty dry. You get about one chance on these. And then with the rigger, you can add some. Stand out a little bit more. Shadow. I think I'm going to put another person in here just to get and fill in. People there just to sort of fill that void. It's not dry. And then I need a shadow from these trees. And that looks really dark, but it'll be okay because it'll run out. Okay. Now I pull out the little bit of gouache and some Pyrrole Orange. Sometimes I'll just add a little bit of that around the painting to suggest some planting. And if I do that, I'm gonna mix that in with a little bit of green.
Michael, we just got a question that says, I think you answered this already, but I'm going to repeat it.
Okay.
Someone has asked, please tell us what you think of the Bohong paper.
I like it a lot. What I've found is that it's very, it's rough paper, and what I like most about it is that it's very easy to get the kind of skips that you want. So I ordered more of it because I like it so much.
Good.
All right, just a few little.
Did you keep all 10 packages of 10?
I did not. When I called them, I said, I don't think you meant to do this. and she said, just a minute, let me talk to my supervisor. And she came back and said, you're right, we didn't. And we'd like them back. So they sent me a thing to UPS came and picked them up.
So that was Jerry's Artorama or Steve?
Yeah,
Jerry's
that was Jerry's Artorama. Yep. Just adding some.
That was a pretty stiff error if you lost them.
Yeah, that's 500 and
yeah,
$570 worth.
Oh boy.
Okay. Now I'm just kind of looking for areas that the value needs some correction on. Okay. It's too bold. Need a little bit of just really light.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Do you actually use gouache for your white, or do you use like zinc white from watercolor?
I use, well, it's white, gouache. I use Holbein. I've found that I really like the Holbein gouache, and I have tried Daniel Smith's Chinese white, and I don't like it at all.
Okay.
What I've found is that it tends to dry in the tube very quickly.
Mm. Okay. Can you tell me the name of the orange again?
It's Pyrrole Orange, Pyrrol.
Okay. And that's a Daniel Smith?
It is, yep. Yep. And Tim Oliver, who's a friend of mine, turned me on to transparent Pyrrole Orange by it's a core color. Mm-hmm. And that's really a nice, it's great for skies if you want some brilliant orange in the sky. Okay. I think it's about done, which means that needs one more thing. Which is a signature.
In orange?
Yep.
Oh. Can you do us a favor and take a picture of that and email it to me, and I'll include it with the YouTube video?
I sure can. Yep.
Thank you. Soon.
I'll do it right after this.
Okay.
So it's, my signature's orange, but it's also pretty thin and not. And then
Did you say that the bow hung paper is soft?
No, it's really, it's very hard actually.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
What a terrific job. Gee whiz.
Yeah,
There it is.
really nice.
Let me see if I can get it.
Yeah.
Out of,
Well, it's
getting a little bit of glare, so.
Yeah, it's going to be great getting a photograph of it, and I'll make sure that everybody gets a chance to see it in an email.
Great,
So,
great.
Anybody have
So
any
that's it.
Questions? Anybody got questions?
Yeah. Unmute yourself and ask away.
Question. Can I have a question?
Sure.
Sure.
Oh, it's the right side of the tree here. The you use black color, is right?
Pine
This
tree?
tree?
Yeah.
Actually, it's sort of green.
Green.
I used it's a very dark green.
Oh.
I used cobalt turquoise, ultramarine blue,
Okay.
a little bit of quinacridone gold, and maybe a little bit of indigo might have gotten in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The dark green. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
The closest thing you got to black was what do you have, neutral tint in there a little bit or not?
No, actually the closest thing I have to black, indigo is really good at darkening.
Mm-hmm.
But so it was just ultramarine blues, burnt sienna, and maybe a little indigo in it. But you can get almost to black with just ultramarine and burnt sienna if it's strong enough.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. I thought the trees in the background were going to be too dark, but they, like you said, they dried light and they're perfect.
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge I think is not painting dark enough early because of the well, you can go too bold, but it does dry lighter. So if you put it on and you go, oh, that's perfect, you pretty much know it's not going to be perfect when you're done.
Anybody else with questions? Would you like to say anything in closing, Mike?
I just think it's a terrific. Well, which mic are you talking about? 2 mics, no waiting.
Either mic is fine.
Katie Turner says thank you.
Thank you.
I just think it was a terrific demonstration. I really appreciate how thoughtfully you went through it. I mean, you explained everything. You did things, and I thought, geez, he's got that spatter for that tree on the left there. That's not going to work. It works great.
It was going to be a mess, wasn't it?
Yeah. Great job. Terrific job.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I have enjoyed doing it and appreciate the invitation to do it. So, and as I look at it, I still see it. I always see a few little things that like verticals that I need to add back in and that sort of thing. So I'll do that and I'll get a quick picture and get it sent off to you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was nice meeting you too.
Nice to meet you.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
same
gonna
here.
stop the